Hello there! It's been a while since we had the last podcast, and I thought as a way to revitalize that and not only rebrand it from Auditive Learning to the Level Up Education podcast, I figured as a first episode, instead of interviewing other people's, which will be the succeeding episodes, I thought about it would be cool if someone was to interview me and go over all of the things that have happened since the last episode and maybe give a broader understanding on the whole concept of Holy Game. So I'm currently here in Portugal, in Braga, visiting a friend of mine. His name is Thales, and he's probably the guy who has the greatest understanding of Holy Game, because he's been giving me advice and just helped develop certain ideas, and through his interviews and through his questions, I believe we can get to a much greater understanding on the whole concept. So Thales, why don't you introduce yourself?
So hey everyone, my name is Thales Alves. I'm from Brazil and I studied psychology in university. Then I left it to specialize in hypnosis, more specifically in hypnotherapy, which is not a subject that usually universities they talk about when teaching psychology. It's a subject with lots of stereotypes around it. So I decided to learn it by myself and to specialize in doing many courses with great hypnotists around the world. And I got into this world of hypnosis and persuasion and influence, and this is the area that I'm the most into. I already gave a Mindvalley talk on it in the last Mindvalley University event, and this is the subject that I'm the most passionate about. And also with lots of interesting regards the future of education, because me as Lucas, as we are going to discuss today, we can find many problems in the education system, but this everyone can do, everybody can complain, but we are here today to talk about some of the possibilities of solutions for this for the future. Really excited for this conversation, and as Lucas just said, today we are gonna turn the tables a little bit. Lucas will be the one being interviewed and not being the one interviewing, because he's the one who can explain the best the concept of Holy Game. This is a acronym, not an acronym, this is abbreviation of what, Lucas?
Yeah, the abbreviation is Holistic Gamified Education. So it is these three aspects that I believe are just so crucial in today's world, that if we get these right, many other problems, I would argue most, will actually be solved through that, because education usually is the root of many problems. Because if people had a better understanding of the world and better values and just better decision making, then many of the problems that we would face, like climate change, like war, they just wouldn't exist if people were educated to the level that they just think scientifically about the absolute truth and always try to get closer to that. The problem about this is it's not necessarily just like always fun, and especially as a student you don't tend to be having this greater insight on just understanding why you're learning all these things. And to be fair, like, you're also not being taught that, but I try to develop a system that kind of incorporates the fun in education while also going deep into the topics that are required to be prepared for the future.
So if I understood correctly, Holy Game is the abbreviation of Holistic Gamified in Education, and you just said that if we prioritize education, we can avoid many other problems in the future, as if education it is kind of a lead domino, that if we get this right, we can get many other things right later on. And you mentioned that this could decrease the amount of wars, for example, around the world. Why do you think that this is so? Because if people they receive better education about biology or mathematics, what the hell does this have to do with decreasing wars around the world or other problems?
I think most of the conflicts, and I'm not just talking about wars, and I may take this a little bit further, but the thing is, many things are based on a misunderstanding and just a lack of understanding one another and understanding a different culture. And when we go deeper into the topic of war, then mostly it is just a clash of two different ideologies and this concept of us versus them. And if we were to introduce the concept or kind of teach more about we are all part of the same species, we are all humans, we all are stuck, or we are all within the same planet, it's in our best interest to just work together. And if we educate and promote more of a let's face and tackle the problems of the world together instead of trying to fight one another, I think we would be like at a much better place and we could progress much further as a species in itself.
And I really like this point that you made, which is all wars, all conflicts, they come from this narrative of there is us versus others, and without this, there cannot be any war. There has to be this narrative of one group versus another. And it seems that the more you take a step back to take a look at the bigger picture, the more unified the group are and the less conflicts there are. And I guess this relates to the whole idea of holism, of seeing things in a broader way. How would you define the holism, which is this first aspect of Holy Game?
Let's start with the definition for holistic, which I think if you were to Google it, you would find something like the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. And if we take the example of a bicycle, you can take a bicycle into its individual parts, but if you just have a pile of like bicycle parts, you cannot do anything with them. They have to be assembled into a bike so you can use it to get from point A to point B at a much faster rate. So by putting these parts together in an intelligent way, you create a much more valuable object than if you just had the parts separately. And this same thing applies not only to education, where we'll go deeper, but I would say applies to all of life, because everything is holistic. Like every person consists of many, many millions of cells that together become organs, and all organs together turn you into this human being. And it doesn't necessarily stop at just one human being, because everyone is part of a family, and the family is usually part of a village or a city, which is in turn part of a country. And most people stop there with kind of thinking of, oh, this is my country. But I would argue and say we need to go even further than that and say, well, we are all part of the same, like we are all from Earth, we are all human beings, we are all facing the same emotions and challenges and anxiety and fear and joy and happiness. This is something that unifies us. And if we think of the whole of humanity as one tribe, as one species, then it's just silly not to work together.
Okay, interesting. And a person who is listening to this may ask themselves, and why should I care about this? Why does it matter? Because, okay, I can take a look, I can take a broader look at things, I can look at the humanity, society, and I can see this bigger picture, but why should I? Is there any advantage for me to be looking at the whole planet, at the whole humanity as a single unit, rather than just, oh yeah, there is me and the others? Why one approach instead of the other?
I think with this approach on seeing the bigger picture and realizing, okay, we are all together on this like Earth, and whether you want to call it spaceship Earth or Mother Earth, it is essentially we are all in the same boat. And by realizing that, then all of the problems, and I think this is ultimately what education should empower the kids or the students to solve the problems in the world. And the problems that we're facing today, like climate change and artificial intelligence, are no longer problems that we can just solve by ourselves. We need to work together at a global level. Otherwise, something like global warming cannot be solved. If one country will just not follow suit on that, then it doesn't really make a big difference that all the other countries decide to go carbon neutral, and a third country is like, oh no, that just means we can burn even more fossil fuels. And by understanding this bigger picture, I think you also understand why you learn certain things. From the perspective of seeing, oh, okay, so these are all the problems that we're facing in the world, then the education becomes not only like, oh, I have to learn this to get a good grade, but it turns more into a, oh, I learned this, so eventually I can maybe help solve this problem. And with that, you can choose a direction in life and say, hey, I'm really passionate about climate change. Let me like go deep into the whole biology and maybe even chemistry part, where you may develop a bacteria that ends up eating all the plastic. So this would reduce pollution by like so much. So instead of just saying, oh, I want to learn biology, you have a goal in mind. But in order to get to this goal, I think you need to see the whole picture to really know what you're passionate about and what problem you want to solve ultimately.
That's nice. And seeing the whole picture also seems to be a way of having a better understanding of reality, right? Getting an awareness of this bigger truth of something that, how can I put this? I see that all of us humans, we are in this quest of making better predictions about the way the world works. So, if I invest my money in this thing, then I lose my money or I get my money. If I do this kind of workouts, I get a better body. And we are all trying to find better ways of making better predictions about how the world works. And if we take this holistic vision about things, we can see this bigger picture and also get closer to these bigger truths. Could you elaborate a little bit more on this idea?
Yeah, I think when we look at the current education system, you're getting a very narrow view on how the world works. You do learn about math, you do learn how to read, how to write, but there's so many areas of life that are just not being taught. And if you don't know how to eat healthy and how to exercise and how to just calm yourself in stressful situations, then it's going to be much harder for you to get to that truth, to perform at the level that you want to perform and understand what is required, because it may feel like you're just running against the wall over and over and over again, and sometimes you need to learn. It's like, maybe I just feel so terrible all the time because my diet is completely messing up my microbiome within my gut. And it's not actually that I'm always low energy and I'm a lazy person. It's just your diet that you may have to change. And through this, you can become a much better student and become ultimately a much better version of yourself.
Okay. Quick question before I move on to what I actually wanted to ask you. What would be the opposite of holism? Individualism, maybe?
I'm not sure if I think the opposite of holism would just be separateness, I would argue, because if things are not connected intelligently, and I think this is what is ultimately missing in the education system, the subjects being connected in an intelligent way that support one another. So not only do you have math and English and science, but you also understand how the body works and how you can eat in a way that will help you study better. You know how to learn things to get ahead in your career. You can make the money within your career to maybe eat out and buy more high quality foods that end up helping you again by having a better performance while studying.
I really like it, the way we put. So the opposite of holism could be seen as separateness, and the phrase that you said, things not being connected in a smart way or in a, I don't remember what was the word, but it was along these lines. And in education, there is this quote from John Butcher from Lifebook, which is the ultimate intelligence, the only intelligence that matters is how well you can live life. Like ultimately all that we are doing is to have a better life, and people in the schools, they cannot see how the subjects that they're learning come together to improve one's life. They see, okay, there is English, there is math, there is this and this, and these just seems things that may or may not help them with their career, and this career may or may not help them with their happiness and fulfillment because they can just mess up this whole choice. So they cannot see how this actually matters for them to feel better about themselves, which is at the end of the day the thing that matters, right? Yeah. At the end of the day we are seeking this. And okay, so if we think of holism, we just talked about holism in terms of the whole humanity of how we can take a step back and see how all humans collaborating towards a greater future. But let's talk about holism in education specifically. So if holism is about encompassing more areas that were not being done before, in education, in the current education system, what is missing? What aspect of holism is missing?
We already touched a few of those. So I would argue just learning more about the body is a crucial aspect. So nutrition, fitness, how to recover from injuries is one of the more crucial aspects. If we think about the mind, I think education does this already at a pretty decent level, learning how to acquire knowledge, how to summarize information, and how to just generally learn more about the world around us. One of the things that I find is completely missing, because if you have a good physical PE teacher, he will probably also talk to you about nutrition. But something that is completely missing in education is the concept of how to calm yourself, how to remain calm and focused in stressful situations. And also learning about the concept of flow, for example, which is this optimal state where we feel our best and perform our best. And I think everyone knows or has been in a state of flow, but they may not know it as a flow state. So if you are very focused on a specific thing, like maybe playing a video game or playing music or just a work that you really enjoy, you forget how much time you actually spent on that. And after 3 or 4 hours, you are done and realize you're really hungry and you also have to visit the bathroom right now. And learning about these things, amongst others, like also your family and your relationships and just how you can behave and amongst other people in a social way and collaborate with one another while also managing your finances. These are all aspects that I think would be an added value if we add them on top of the current education system and intertwine them with the subjects that we are currently learning. Because if we take history, for example, you can not just have we learn history because it's in the curriculum. No, we learn history so we understand the past, and thus we can make better predictions for the future. And if we take it from that approach, we can look at people that have been living in the history, the giants on whose shoulders we stand today, and see what was their motivation. How did they contribute to the society? What was the thing that gave their life meaning? And if we study the people in the past, then maybe we can find that within ourselves.
So to make a quick recap, we started by looking at Holy Game, and this represents holistic gamified in education. We went to the first aspect of holism, which is, how did you define that again in your own words? It was...
I started with the whole is greater than the sum of its parts, but ultimately I think the holistic aspect is just combining things in an intelligent way so you see the bigger picture.
Oh, nice. That's greatly put. And we as humanity, we can embrace this concept of holism to see, oh, if we all work together towards this better future for the next generations, we can do this much better if we understand that these concepts of separation, they comes from many misunderstandings about the world, many illusions, many of the tricks that our mind plays on us. So we can see the aspect of holism through this, of humanity, but also we can see holism as specifically in education, for example, looking at the subjects that are being taught in the schools and seeing that, as you put, they are not being connected intelligently to see the greater picture. And if people understood that ultimately, all of us, we are in this quest for a better life, these subjects, if they were put together in a nice way, so as you said, studying history and seeing the motivation of these great leaders and approaching the subjects in this manner, people, they could be much more engaged to learn all these subjects, right? So this is the holism. Before we move to the part of the gamified, I want to ask you this, and I generally don't know what you're going to answer. So if it's holism, it's all about embracing more. Does it mean that we have to learn everything? So you think history, geography, politics, economics, mathematics, art, there is all this. If it is all about embracing more, do kids have to learn all these concepts?
I would actually tie this to the gamified aspect, because something that I find almost the most interesting in games is that you have the choice. So something that I would use in your question, how do we learn all of this, is give the students the choice to progress at their own speeds. So through this, they get to explore their interests and their passions. And then maybe we can enable a certain safety mechanism that once you've progressed to a certain level in history, because you're just like so in love and passionate about history, then you say, hey, in order to get to the next stage or to the next class, you have to at least complete math to that certain degree, so you understand it and you're not too far left behind. But generally, I would really encourage this path of exploration and allowing the students to choose themselves. And through this, they get a basic understanding of the most important subjects, but they also have the choice to go much deeper in the thing that they are passionate about and they ultimately want to pursue as a job or career or as this problem they want to solve in the world.
So students, when they are very little, they may not have the full awareness of how important some things are. So they may say, oh, I don't want to learn anything at all of mathematics. But we as adults, we could look at it and say, hey, there is some basics that you have to understand. And given the basics of some of these areas, based on their interests, on the engagement, or on their natural predispositions, they could choose how much more time they're going to invest into those things.
Yeah,
is that it?
It's a little bit like when you're playing a game and you find a new piece of equipment that you're like, oh my god, this is perfect for my character, it improves just the right stats. But in order to wear this, you need to have at least this level of strength. So maybe even though you may be like an archer or a mage, which doesn't require a lot of strength, you need this minimum level of strength in order to equip this piece of armor, for example. And if we take this concept and apply that to schools, say, in order to progress to the point of history where you want to learn, you have to have at least this basic understanding of math and maybe even politics, because otherwise this concept of history will not make sense. So we still start with the whole goal in mind and say, hey, let's take the concept of an engine. How does an engine work? You don't learn about, okay, this is a wrench and this is a screwdriver. No, you start with the engine and say, okay, now let's take this engine apart, and for that we need a wrench. And then I tell you about the wrench. So if we apply this to the education, we say, hey, you want to learn about this specific time in history. Before you can do that, let's also talk about the politics that were involved in there, and maybe even some context in math, because that applies within that lesson. So through that, they understand, oh, that's why I have to learn that, so I can understand this thing that I'm actually interested in. And thus, the education becomes more purposeful, and the student actually knows why they have to learn that.
Thus increasing the overall engagement of the student
100%.
on this. Okay, since we are in the subject of increasing the students' engagement, something that you just mentioned right now, taking an engine and getting the students to learn this. You can say, hey, go learn this, but if you take an intriguing object and you give this to a group of kids, they may look at that and they don't know what it is. They can feel the impulse to explore that, but if you just say, hey, you have to explore that right now, go do this, they feel this kind of obligation to do it, and this decreases a little bit of the motivation. So I think it is possible to present certain subjects in a way that triggers the natural people's curiosity to go learn that, instead of just saying you have to do the thing. And all this seems to touch on the subject of gamification, which is if people have the choice to pursue this path more intensively than the other one because they have some predisposition, and predisposition simply means, oh, I find it more fulfilling to do this instead of the other. We are talking about the gamifying is things. But before we talk about that, why bringing the aspect of gamification into the concept of a holy game? Like, why are games important in your opinion?
Multiple reasons. Let me start with a story that I think exemplifies this concept, and it will make it very obvious. So if we look at today's schools, most students are extremely distracted and have a very low attention span due to social media. So social media, I think we can all agree, is extremely engaging, because the companies like Meta and essentially everyone tries to capture your attention, and they all use the human behavior mechanics to manipulate you to just spend a little bit more time within their app. And I think this will just always be more interesting than learning in a textbook. So it's not that students don't want to learn or are not interested, but compared to the alternative that they have, it's just extremely boring. Like, why would you read in a textbook about things that are so boring if you can like literally get 10 pieces of new information by scrolling on your phone? Through that, I think it's still important that we learn things, but we need to change the way how we learn. And a way to compete with this social media, I believe, is with games. Because ultimately, social media is just maximizes engagement, but in the short form. So you are engaged for 10 seconds, 10 seconds, 10 seconds. But if you, for example, look at students or generally anyone playing a game, they are fixed on this one game for like hours and hours on end, on just like this one single thing. So if we understand that social media is more or less destroying our attention span, and games are extremely good at capturing our attention, then I believe it's just an obvious choice to make education more like games, so we can capture also the attention of the students, but in a much longer form, like for hours and hours on end, to the point where they are, and I know addiction has a negative connotation, but if we make students addicted to learning, addicted to just exploring the world around them and solving real life problems, then I think this would be a positive step towards the future of humanity.
Ooh, I love it how you put this, which is the alternative is more engaging. So if you take the current education system and a social media, the alternative, which is the social media, is more engaging than this. Which reminds me that as I also work with marketing and I know a lot about persuasion techniques and things like that, I know that there are millions, if not billions of dollars being invested into making the apps in social media more engaging, more attractive. And I don't think there is even a fraction of this amount of money being invested into education. Like, oh, let's see how we can make this much, much more attractive. So in the social media part of it, there are tons of money being invested to catch people's attention, to drag them into this and to get them stuck into it. If you try to leave a social media app, it is really hard. Like after you finish the YouTube video, there is the autoplay for the next lesson and so on and so on. But I think I've never seen an education platform that has an autoplay for a lesson. First of all, the lesson is boring. So even if there was the autoplay, I don't think people would stay watching. But if we imagine this very engaging lesson with an autoplay and other many of these mental triggers that keep people interested in what they are seeing, damn, education could balance things out with social media again. And I think ideally even going a little bit above that, but with this, we have to have some considerations there. But okay, nice. A personal bias that I had when we started talking about this whole idea of gamification was, I don't really like games, like I want things to be treated seriously. And some professors or some teachers who may be watching this right now, they may think, but my lesson is some serious stuff. I don't want to turn all this into games. But I think this may come from a misconception that people have about games. Because I think at the end of the day, games are all about decreasing friction, making things more engaging. So this doesn't have to be this character that is in front of your screen that you can play around, but it can simply mean adding some elements of gamification into whatever you were teaching, right? Could you point out what could be some of these elements that we could bring into classes to make things more interesting?
Something, or the specific games that I tend to look mostly when trying to gamify certain elements of my life or even the education, is from role-playing games. And I think these are really powerful because they are already very similar to the life that we live in currently. So there isn't a lot of things that you have to learn additionally, but it becomes more intuitive. So you more or less start with this character that you can create for yourself. And if you think of yourself right now, you can also move in certain directions and say, hey, I want to become a singer or an artist or a programmer. And there are just certain steps that you need to complete to get there. So you could just reframe this as a quest. So instead of rescuing the princess, which has multiple tasks attached to that, you can say, I want to become an engineer. And then you break down this bigger quest into smaller quests that are much more manageable. So through this, we don't really have this anxiety to get started because the task ahead of us is just so daunting. We just have to take the next step. And not only do we just have to take the next step, but we also see visual progress on how we are getting better. And I think this happens within education and in everyone's life. The longer you practice something, the better you get. But it's kind of like if you have children, you don't really see them growing up because you see them all of the time. So same thing applies to your skills. If you start playing the piano and you kind of just play every week, there isn't a big difference between week 2 and week 3. But there's a huge difference between week 2 and week 20, and then week 200. And just allowing yourself to see this progress, to see your current level in this specific area or in this skill would add this level of motivation that you can just utilize, and you actually see, oh, I'm moving not only in the right direction, but I can also look back and feel proud and feel this sense of accomplishment. And that I feel like is a little bit missing if you just see letters on a scorecard, which, by the way, are not even really improving. So even though you are improving in English year after year after year, you may still get the same B, even though your English in grade 5 is at a much lower level than your English in grade 10. And it just doesn't display or kind of show you how far you have come actually.
Yeah, I think now that I gave this example of the English, this is really visible. If you have been spending your entire life getting a B on English, this is not bad, but you still have the same sensation that you are on the same place, like you are still B on English. But if you compare your skills from now compared to the very beginning, damn, such a big improvement. So some of the elements of gamification that you just pointed out were breaking tasks into smaller tasks. So if we think of a video game, we always know, or at least we have a good hint of what are the things that we should be doing next. When I was playing Super Mario, I could say, oh, after this world, I have to go to the other world. And everything was so clear. So this reduces the feeling of overwhelm, of having so many things to do. So breaking things down into smaller tasks is one aspect of gamification. You also mentioned having a visual progress for what you're doing, and I think you managed to incorporate this in your own online systems of productivity, because I've seen your document, right? You have at the very beginning of the document these levels where you can see, oh, in this area of life I am in this level, the other area of life I'm in another level, and people, they don't have this in school, right?
No, and I think this is what really motivated me throughout my studies. And in school, I never really was interested in doing the homework and doing the projects because I didn't see the point. And in university, I just took the concept of, oh, I need to pass this test in programming. Instead of just blindly memorizing all of these facts, I just said, okay, if I were to create a project and program this menu, which includes all of the things that we have learned, I would understand it not only on a much deeper level, but it would also be fun and I would have something to show for. And through this, I was always able to finish all my assignments, and I haven't failed a single class through that. And it was much less painful because I was always working on something. And at the end of my university, not only did I have like the paper in my hand where it's like, oh, well, I graduated, but I had these like tens of 30s projects within my portfolio that I can show people. It's like, hey, look, I built my own calendar, or I created a database where all of the movies are ranked by a specific order of my preference. And through these projects, I was able to understand the concept at a much deeper level or in more depth and just incorporate them. Not just, learn to pass the test and then forget, but actually learn to incorporate this and have this for the rest of my life.
That's really nice. And as you were saying, there's something that came to my mind is not only the subjects inside of the schools, how they are being gamified, but also the mentality that a person has towards a game. Because if I am playing any game, such as the famous Mario, and you fail that phase, you say, oh, now I can try again, and now I know exactly what I did wrong. At this part of the game, I slipped off, so let me try again and not make this mistake. And in education, failure is in the current education system, failure is approached in a different way. Like, you want to hide it, you are embarrassed from it, and you don't even receive a proper feedback on how you can improve, right?
Yeah, that's an insanely important point that you just mentioned, that not only should failure be encouraged, but on top of that, I think you should choose when to be tested or when to fight the boss battle. Because why kind of go into an exam knowing that you are not going to pass anyways? Like, it's just going to be demotivating receiving this failing grade, which you know you'll get anyways. And when you are playing like a role-playing game and you go completely unprepared into a boss room, like, you don't really learn anything, because the boss may just one-shot you and you're like, oh wow, unless you're like really invested into this game, you're probably not gonna have fun doing that. So instead of forcing students to take the exam at a specific time, I think it would be a much better approach to let them choose when they are ready and say, hey, I think I have acquired enough knowledge and completed the projects, so like, now test me. And now this test isn't something that you're afraid of, but it is a way for you to prove what you have learned, and it's actually something exciting. And just beating that boss that has been challenging and you had to learn a whole lot for, but because you are prepared now, it is suddenly a much more satisfying experience. And through this, you may actually want to increase the difficulty, because say, hey, maybe you defeated the boss and it's like, oh, that was easy. Like, I want to like do this again, but give the boss even more health points. So I need to kind of challenge myself to the point, and through this, I think you may find what you're interested in. Because also in university, there were certain exams where I was like, oh, these questions were kind of too easy. I wish they had like asked more so I could show what I actually learned and what I know. And then there were other exams where I was like, whew, I'm really glad this was the complexity. But that kind of goes back to the concept of like, everyone has different interests and everyone should be able to choose on how far they go in a certain subject.
Yeah. I never had thought of this, that inside of a video game, many video games, you can choose when you fight the boss. I have never thought of that. And in this current education system, not only you do not choose when you fight the boss, but like everyone fights the boss together at the same time, which is really weird. So people who have developed differently their skill sets, all of them, they have to go to fight the boss together, which is really weird.
I'd be careful about that, because I think there is value in kind of fighting the boss together. But if we look at the current education system, you all have to fight the boss at the same time, but you're not allowed to help one another. I think it would be different if you were allowed to collaborate, because this is actually a common practice in many MMO games, like massive multiplayer online games, where you get to get a group together and fight this boss, and you actually have to be multiple people in order to defeat that. And I think this is a good practice if you can also choose as a group to tackle a project that is that's way too difficult to just solve on your own. But even there, you still choose whether you want to fight the boss or not. It's not something that you are forced to do, and it's not something that induces anxiety, because ultimately you have the option to choose the boss, and you can gather your teammates and your squad and decide, okay, what's the strategy, who does what, and through that I think we add a whole nother layer on this concept, delving into leadership, into management, into coordination, which are also skills that I believe can be improved within the education system.
Yeah, I can see that. Good point. And usually if people, they get outside help or they collaborate in school in an exam, this is considered cheating. But if this happens in real life, this is like the leadership, this is the entrepreneurship thing. And a person should be rewarded if they are really well at gathering people to solve a problem. I don't remember if it was Elon Musk who said this or Albert Einstein. Everybody quotes Albert Einstein. Like, I don't have to know how to build the rockets. I just have to hire the right people who can do that. So Elon Musk, he's a brilliant person at gathering the right people to do a certain type of job. And if in an exam, you don't know how to solve that, but you know exactly how to put a group of people together, you should not be punished by that, but this is something that should be encouraged. Of course, you all should also learn how to solve that problem a little bit by yourself, but valuing this aspect of yourself, of being a good people gatherer, being good at creating a community, at solving problem, at encouraging others to solve that with you. Because the leadership is a lot about this, getting many people aligned with a vision that you have in mind, right?
Yeah, and it's just a weird concept that, like, throughout your school day, you are encouraged to work together and help each other. But when it comes to the actual exam and performing, you are not allowed to speak to one another. And similar to the tools that you use, like, in the classroom and like at home, you're able to use the internet, your computer, your calculator, even ChatGPT to solve the things. But in the exams, you're being like, all of these tools are taken away. So this is the equivalent of like fighting against enemies in a video game, and then the most powerful enemy appears, and like you're suddenly just standing there without armor, without weapons, trying to like fight this boss. So why do we take all of these tools away if in no perceivable future will you not have access to your phone, will you not have access to AI at this point? So instead of just taking all of these things away, we should just adjust the test, so maybe make it even more difficult, because again, there is nothing wrong with increasing the difficulty. Students may even actually enjoy that, but don't take away their tools, because I think we are supposed to learn how to use these tools. And if we do not get to use them in this most crucial moment, then ultimately this is holding us back.
And now that you mentioned ChatGPT, I saw many teachers publishing posts on Facebook being concerned about this, being concerned that this would not be adopted in the schools. And it is funny if this would not be adopted in the schools, because the teachers don't want the students to know how to use well the tools that they will use in the future. So it's kind of like, oh, hey, you're going to work as a mechanics, but I'm not going to let you to use a hammer in the classroom. You have to hit the nail with your own hand. But like, you will be working with a hammer, right? It makes sense for you to learn how to use the hammer properly inside of the classroom. And very quickly, one more aspect of gamification that came to my mind, talking about bosses and going to fight the boss together, there can be some value, as you pointed out, is how often you can fight the boss. Because in a game, if you failed, not only you can try again, but you can say, okay, I'm going to spend the next hours studying, testing again, developing my skills, so I can fight the boss. But in university, there is one exam every 6 months, at least that was the case for me. And if I failed there, ta-da, you have to spend a whole 6 months again relearning that. So the amount of feedback loops that you have is just so little. You have one chance every now and then. Yeah,
and even that is limited to usually 3 trials. So imagine...
You had 3? I had only 1.
Oh, wow. Okay. Also, that means if you fail once, you cannot like continue studying?
Oh, okay. Now I get what you mean.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah, but like this is the equivalent of if you like play Super Mario and Bowser defeats you 3 times, you cannot play the game anymore. I was like, but like I paid for the game. And like even though fortunately in many countries education is free, it's just a silly concept of saying, hey, even though this may be the most passionate thing, because you have failed, and like let's reframe failed as you have tried multiple times, we don't let you try again. Like, why not? Why not? And especially in today's age where computers and artificial intelligence allows us to do our jobs at a much more efficient rate, I do get the arguments like, oh yeah, there's like so much head over to kind of enroll the students again and again and again. But with artificial intelligence, I think we can allow this level of customization and individuality.
Oh, so true, so true. Oh my God. I can go in a very different direction right now. I'm wondering if I should do that or not. But okay, let me hold back to, okay, recapping. We started holistic gamified education, holism, seeing a greater truths and also incorporating things that were not being incorporated before. We can do this for humanity, taking a look at how all of us as a society, we can create a better future. We can do the same thing for education, looking at subjects and subjects that are not being connected in a nice way. And we can do this better. We can show students how everything comes together to helping them have better lives. Good. So holism, it was this. Then we talked about the gamified aspect of this. So when you have a clear vision for the future, you are more engaged to do this, and having a clear vision is not the only aspect that increases your motivation. There are many other things, usually adopted in games, that we can bring to the education. So people find this interesting as social media, as addictive as social media. So we are not in this unfair fight of being there are millions of dollars being put into the social media, and there is no one taking care of how we can make education more compelling. Oh, I think it's a nice way of putting what you're doing. So there are many people putting money on how to make social media more compelling, but there is no one thinking about how we can counterbalance that, making the education more compelling. And the whole game is about this, is about taking education, taking a step back and seeing what really matters for us to bring together subjects that help us have a better lives, and doing this in an interesting way, kind of trying to counterbalance this tendency of people to go into other less useful things to their lives. And with this, I think we also have to talk about technology, which is a big aspect on this, how technology is going to affect all this for the future.
Yeah, because when kind of thinking about a way to improve education system, something that I think we should always keep in mind is how can this remain relevant for much longer than just 20, 30 years. So with that, we just have to incorporate technologies, and we have to be aware on not only the emerging technologies, but maybe technologies that take still 5 to 10 years. But something that is very difficult to wrap our head around as humans is this concept of exponential change. Exactly. And with that, we just need to be aware that how things are today will be very different to how things will be in 10 years. Because like if we look back 20 years, we didn't even have smartphones. But if we look 10 years in the future, there will be even more change than the advancement of smartphones or the internet. So when we look at specifically these technologies that are emerging, we just have to also talk about how artificial intelligence is right now currently disrupting the education system. And that is one of the reasons why I studied business IT, because I knew AI will play just one of the biggest roles in our future of humanity, and other technologies that I don't think are quite there yet, but will eventually make as big of an impact, maybe even a bigger one than artificial intelligence, but probably just because they work with AI, are virtual reality and the whole concept of the blockchain with Web3. Because with this, we will just have a very different way on how to learn and how to just engage the students.
It's hard for someone who doesn't know these concepts to imagine what you're talking about. Like, oh, blockchain, is this really going to change the education and AI? So if you are outside of this bubble, I think many people watching could think, how could this possibly impact education? How would you advise for people to understand that? Is there anything that they should take a better look at?
Yeah, I think the best way to understand the concept, and I think this can also be used within the classroom, is looking at different stories. And when we talk about stories, is from books and movies, but also series and games, because all of these just tell you how things may be. And when talking about the future, it's very hard to know exactly how it's going to be. But if you take a look at all of the movies that talk about AI and you take the average of all of them, then you have a pretty good understanding of what artificial intelligence is. And the same part is for virtual reality. I think good movies for that, that you can consume to get a better understanding of that, would be Ready Player One. Either watching the movie or reading the book. And this is just where it starts. There are many more concepts and experiences that you can just look and understand through the concept of stories. And ultimately, this is also way more engaging than reading a Wikipedia article, and you will have a way deeper depth of knowledge around this concept, because it's not just this abstract form that like swirls in your head, but it's actually connected to things that you are familiar with.
Okay. In artificial intelligence specifically, how do you think that this is going to change the role of teachers for the future?
I think artificial intelligence may be in many ways the worst nightmare of teachers, or at least that's what they think, but actually it is probably the greatest blessing, because at the moment we have a massive lack of highly qualitative teachers. There are just not enough people who want to do the job at the highest level, especially teachers in IT, because there are many reasons for that. One of them is salary, because when you go into the business world, you'll just end up earning usually more than a teacher. But also the concept of having to prepare to do the work that you do, then actually working at the school, and then after the work is done, you still have to kind of conclude the work. So many people go into the world of teaching and think, oh yeah, we have like so many more vacation days, but just the concept of, oh, you have to grade, you have to prepare your lessons, you have to kind of prepare the lessons afterwards, which is, there's a word for it, but it slipped my mind. And I think with artificial intelligence, all of these things can be much easier, and you can spend a lot more time on actually teaching instead of preparing to teach, because you have an idea in your head, and what AI does is it allows you to go from idea to execution much faster. Because you may have an idea, hey, I am a history teacher, and I would like my students to compare these two historical figures with one another in a debate. So this requires a lot of preparation on the side of the teacher. But if you just were to input this in ChatGPT or any other text transformative AI, it will give you an outline on how this can look like. And then as a teacher, you only have to edit that. So it is as if you had done the work, you kind of took a full night of sleep, you rested, you're like still fresh, because like usually after writing 2 or 3 pages, you're just not as relaxed anymore. And after just like having the AI do that for you, you can say, hey, no, I actually have done something similar, can you adjust this? And it'll just do that for you. So you save so much time, and you can just spend that time being a better teacher instead of like having to prepare all of your classes. And eventually, I don't think we're quite there yet, but considering on how fast AI is actually evolving, you will probably be able to use AI to grade the assignments of your students as well. By just taking a picture of the assignment, or when you're already digital, this will be much easier, and you can give the AI the criteria on how you would grade the things, give it an example, and then it just does the work that you have done once across 30 or maybe even hundreds of students, saving you massive amounts of times, which allows you to just become a better teacher overall.
So many great examples. And one more that just came to me is AI could allow the minds of great teachers to come together to find the best way of teaching a subject, as we were talking recently. There are big YouTube channels such as Kurzgesagt which have amazing ways of teaching things in a very engaging way, and a teacher in the middle of a poor country, in the middle of nowhere, does not have the same resources, the same amount of time, the same amount of preparation, the same amount of knowledge into how to make teaching compelling as big YouTube channels such as the Kurzgesagt, which is not sponsored, but you can you can go visit.
I wish.
And the AI could look, okay, what is the pattern between all these videos that are so captivating, and then creating this ultimate way of teaching things. It doesn't have to be one ultimate way, but what do you find interesting? Oh, I like Kurzgesagt. I also like following this channel, Impact Theory, which is also not sponsored, and all these other channels. And then the AI could look at all this and say, ta-da, here is for you the way, this subject explained in the way that you like it, right? Using also your own metaphors that you like to use.
Yeah, 100%. So as a teacher, you move from a place of, oh, I have to prepare everything, to just selecting the things that you already like and say, okay, use these information that I find a great resource and give these to the students. So instead of lecturing to the students and holding the same lecture for like hundreds and hundreds of times across multiple years, you can just send the highest quality of education to the students that they can consume at their own speed, like also at home, and then in the school they would just do these exercises. So instead of doing the homework and the exercises at home, where they may run into problems and like the parents may not be equipped to help them out with these problems, they just have to consume at home, which is like very manageable, and then in school they actually get to work with their peers, they get to ask questions on something they have not understand. And I think this is ultimately what, as a teacher, you bring the most value. And having a student, hey, I don't understand this, can you walk me through this in a different way? Because even though you may have showed this really high qualitative resource, it's just like doesn't click in your student's head, and they are not able to ask the creators of Kurzgesagt or Impact Theory or like any of these amazing resources this specific question. So this is where you as a teacher come in, where you get to actually interact with your student and you get to teach instead of just lecturing about something over and over and over again.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I wanted to keep going. We are running out of time, so let me try to do something just to finish things. Let's try to give people something actionable for them to do. So they have already heard of this concept of holistic, gamified education, how AI and technology can change everything, how incorporating elements of gamification into education could be fun. But if they were to take a look at their lives, what is a model that you could suggest for people to look at their lives? So they're right now just looking at their university or their profession and maybe their personal life, but they could take a broader look and dividing this into some areas, right?
Yeah, so if we want to close with some actionable advice, I would just give something for each of the concepts that we've been discussing. So if you want to move towards more of a holistic life approach, I just advise you to explore topics broadly, see how things are connected, encourage your students to question things more broadly, and give real-life examples on certain things that you're teaching and connecting the one piece of information with something else. And through this, the students will already have a better picture on why this is relevant, what they're learning. To maybe increase the engagements of your students and motivate them at a higher level, allowing them to choose what they learn, giving them some level of individualization. And it doesn't have to be to the point where they can like choose their own curriculum. We don't have to like start there. You can start simply, hey, do you want to read this novel or this novel? And maybe you have to read both, but then you just give them the choice. You want to read this first or you want to read this first? And by giving the students a choice, they are not only less likely to complain, but they feel like they have a sense of autonomy, which I think should be encouraged so they can just become functional adults, because ultimately you have to take care of yourself in the end. And the earlier we start promoting that in school, the better of a job they will do. And lastly, something actionable for education is, at the moment, probably the most important thing is understanding how ChatGPT works. So if you have only heard of it and you haven't tried it out, I highly encourage you to just sign up. It's super easy. You can log in with Google or basically with any other email address. It's super straightforward. If you don't know what to do, just ask ChatGPT to explain what ChatGPT is, and it will already do a great example of that. And if you want to delve even deeper, I'm currently creating a quiz where you can kind of test yourself on how well-rounded you are as a person and how you can kind of learn about all these different areas of life. And it will be down in the description, so you can check that out. And in generally, I hope you've enjoyed this whole new format. This is kind of like an exception where I was being interviewed this time. In the future, I will be the one interviewing other experts in the field of holistic gamified education and really exploring different ways on how we can level up education and just prepare our students for the future.
Can I make one request before this? Recently, you showed me this assessment that helped me take a better look at my life in different areas of life, like really taking a look at life and dividing this into body, mind, soul, relationships, and many areas. And you gave that to me. Could you make that available to some people as soon as this is released, and maybe put in the link in the description?
Yeah, I for sure will do that. It's like a quiz that you can take completely for free. I'm just trying to help you gain a greater understanding of these concepts, and I've been using them, like these areas of life, for almost 4 years now. So I've been tweaking and testing them over this time. So if you can gain any value of that whatsoever, I'd be super happy about that. And yeah, I'll continue providing more and more value to just get to the next level of education.
Yeah, here's a gift for all of you who are watching. Like, he gave this to me. I found this really cool, and now I'm asking him live to put this in the description so other people can also benefit from that. So I think if you can do this and put the link down there, people that are gonna find this amazing. And yeah, it was a pleasure having this conversation with you, and let's see who are the next guests who come to this whole gamification aspect of life.
Amazing. Appreciate. Thank you for these amazing questions that were really going deep into certain topics. If people want to reach out to you, kind of maybe ask you the questions about hypnosis or hypnotherapy and going deeper into psychology, where would they find you?
They can go to my website, talesreis.com, that you can put in the description of the video. I think this is the easiest way. I have to be more active on Instagram, but I think the website is just a nice place to start. Yeah.
Amazing. All right. Well, until the next one, and yeah, are here to get education to the next level, and I hope I also see you at the next level. Bye bye.
See ya.